What if I told you the sun is dying and almost nobody on Earth knows it yet? Not in a billion years, not in a million years, in decades. Now imagine you're the one person who has to fix it. Except there's a problem. You don't remember your own name. This is not a metaphor. This is the actual opening of one of the most gripping science fiction novels of the last decade. Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir, the same mind behind The Martian. But stick with me here because this video is not a book report. I'm not going to walk you through Chapter 1, Chapter 2, Chapter 3. That's boring, and frankly, it wastes your time. Instead, I'm going to hand you the 3 most powerful ideas buried inside this story. Ideas about problem solving under pressure, about trust between strangers, and about what it actually means to sacrifice something for a cause bigger than yourself. Because here's the truth. Most of us will never fly a spacecraft to another star system, but every single one of us will face a moment where we feel completely out of our depth. A moment where we wake up, figuratively or literally, and realize we're the only one who can solve the problem in front of us. So, let's get into it. The story begins with a man named Ryland Grace. He wakes up on a bed. He's alone. There were 2 other beds in the room, and the people in them are dead, mummified, long gone. He doesn't know where he is. He doesn't know who he is. He doesn't even know how long he's been lying there. Slowly, painfully, his memory starts to return in fragments, not in one clean flood the way memory works in most movies, but in broken pieces that don't fit together yet. A name here, a smell there, a half-formed feeling of dread he can't explain. And what he eventually pieces together is terrifying. He is on a spacecraft. That spacecraft is called the Hail Mary, and he is millions of miles from Earth on a mission that might be humanity's last chance at survival. Here's the premise stripped down to its core. A microscopic organism, the book calls it astrophage, has infected the sun. It's consuming the sun's energy, slowly dimming it. And if nothing is done, Earth will freeze, crops will fail, billions will die. Sit with that for a second. The sun itself becomes the villain. Not aliens, not nukes, not politics. The single most reliable thing in human existence, sunrise, sunset, warmth, life, starts working against us. Think about how strange that actually is psychologically. Every warning system humans have ever built is designed to detect threats that look like threats. Fire, predators, disease, sudden danger. But this threat doesn't look like danger at all. It looks like a slightly dimmer sky, a fraction of a degree colder. The kind of change you could easily explain away season after season until it's undeniable. That's the kind of premise that grabs you by the collar. And it should, because underneath the science fiction, there's a very real psychological lesson here. Threats that seem abstract and distant, climate shifts, economic decline, health decline, often move slower than panic, which is exactly why people ignore them until it's almost too late. Ask yourself honestly, how many warning signs in your own life have you explained away because the change felt too slow, too small, too easy to ignore for just one more day? A relationship that's been quietly cooling for months, a habit that's been chipping away at your health one small decision at a time, a career path that stopped growing years ago but still feels fine enough to avoid confronting directly. None of these show up as sirens. They show up as a slightly dimmer version of what used to feel bright. And that's exactly what makes them dangerous, not because they're sudden, but because they're not. Now here's where it gets interesting. Earth doesn't just throw up its hands. A woman named Eva Stratt is put in charge of the entire global response, and she is given something almost no single human in history has ever had: unlimited authority across every nation to solve one problem. Weir uses her character to explore something most leadership content never touches. What happens when bureaucracy is completely removed? What happens when one person can make a decision instantly, without a committee, without a vote, without months of debate? It's uncomfortable. It's also, in the story, terrifyingly effective. There's no red tape when the entire planet is the deadline. Every resource, every scientist, every dollar gets redirected toward one single goal. No competing priorities, no political posturing, just one mission. But I'm not here to talk about world governments. I'm here to talk about you, sitting alone with a problem that feels too big to solve. Because that's exactly the position Ryland Grace is in. Except his problem isn't paperwork, and it isn't a committee meeting. It's survival on a ship with no memory, no crew, and no way home. And that brings us to the first big idea this book hands you. An idea about how real problem solving actually works. Not the clean, cinematic version you see at movies, where the hero has a flash of genius and everything clicks into place, but the messy, frustrating, iterative version that actually gets results in real life. Stick around, because once you understand this concept, you'll start noticing it everywhere in your own life. At work, in relationships, in every problem you've been avoiding because it feels unsolvable. Let's get into concept number 1. Grace's memories return slowly, and through them we learn something crucial. He wasn't originally supposed to be on this mission. He was a molecular biologist and at the time the crisis began, a middle school science teacher. Not a career astronaut, not a hero by trade, not the kind of person anyone would expect to end up saving humanity. He was recruited because of one narrow expertise. He had written a paper, largely dismissed at the time, arguing that life might not need water to survive the way scientists had always assumed. That single unpopular idea, ignored for years, mocked by some of his peers, ends up being the reason he's the only person alive who can understand what's happening to the sun. Ask yourself this: how many ideas have you had that felt small, unimportant, maybe even embarrassing to bring up out loud? How many times have you shelved a thought because you assumed nobody would care, or worse, that people would laugh? Grace's forgotten paper becomes the key to saving billions of lives. That's not a coincidence Weir wrote in purely for drama. It's a pattern that shows up constantly in real innovation. The unconventional, the doubted, the "why does this even matter?" idea often turns out to be the missing piece nobody else was looking for, precisely because everyone else was looking somewhere more obvious. Here's the uncomfortable truth underneath that. The world doesn't reward original thinking right away. It usually ignores it, sometimes for years. The reward often comes later, quietly, when the moment finally arrives that only that idea can address. And here's the part that should really sit with you. Grace didn't know when he wrote that paper that it would ever matter. He wasn't chasing recognition. He was simply following a question he found genuinely interesting even when nobody else did. That's worth remembering the next time you feel foolish for caring about something other people dismiss. You rarely know in advance which idea, which skill, which strange interest is going to become the thing that matters most later. Hold that thought, because in the next section, we're going to dig into exactly how Grace uses this kind of thinking to survive completely alone in deep space. And the method he uses is something you can apply the next time you're stuck on a problem with no obvious answer, no manual, and no one coming to save you. So Grace wakes up, no memory, 2 dead crewmates, a ship he barely understands, and a mission he can't fully recall. What does he do first? He doesn't panic and shut down. He doesn't wait for instructions. He starts testing things. This is the first major concept I want you to take from this book. Problem solving through structured experimentation. Not guesswork, not hope, not waiting for inspiration to strike. Grace treats his own memory loss like a science problem. He writes things down. He tests small hypotheses. He builds a mental map, one confirmed fact at a time. He doesn't trust his gut. He trusts evidence, even when the evidence is scraps. Think about how differently most people approach a crisis. They either freeze, overwhelmed by the size of the problem, or they panic and make impulsive decisions, trying to fix everything at once, hoping something sticks. Grace does neither. He breaks an impossible problem. I have amnesia on an alien-infested spaceship light years away from home, into small, testable questions. What does this button do? What does this readout mean? What happened in the last hour before I forgot everything? One small answer at a time, no leap of faith, no shortcut. This mirrors something real researchers and engineers actually rely on, something Weir clearly leaned on when writing the technical backbone of this story, the scientific method applied under extreme pressure. Observe, hypothesize, test, adjust, repeat. Notice what's missing from that list. There's no step called wait until you feel ready. There's no step called wait for certainty. Every step assumes you're moving forward with incomplete information and adjusting as new information arrives. That's a very different model of confidence than the one most of us grew up believing in. We tend to think confidence means knowing the answer before you act. Grace's version of confidence is closer to trusting the process of finding the answer, even when the first 10 attempts fail completely. Here's the part that should hit you personally. Most people treat big problems like a wall. They stand in front of it, stare at how tall and impossible it looks, and give up before they've even touched it. Grace treats the wall like a puzzle with pieces. Not because he's fearless, he's terrified through most of this book, but because breaking the problem down is the only way forward that doesn't involve total paralysis. Fear doesn't disappear in the story, it just stops being the thing in charge. Grace is scared in almost every chapter. He just refuses to let that fear replace action. Imagine applying that to your own life for a second. The overwhelming financial goal, the career pivot that feels impossible, the health problem you've been avoiding because the whole picture feels too big to face. What if, instead of staring at the whole mountain, you did what Grace does? Identify one testable, answerable question, answer it, then ask the next one. Not the entire 5-year plan, just the next honest question. That's not motivational fluff, that's literally the method that keeps him alive when every reasonable expectation says he should already be dead. There's also something quietly reassuring buried in this part of the story. Grace doesn't get everything right. He makes mistakes, he misreads instruments, he forms wrong theories that later collapse the moment new evidence contradicts them. And none of that stops him. Because the goal was never to be right the first time, the goal was to keep narrowing the gap between confusion and understanding, one test at a time, even when the tests embarrass him or waste precious hours he doesn't have. That distinction matters more than it sounds like it should. Most people quit a difficult problem the moment their first attempt fails, treating the failure as proof they're not capable. Grace treats failure as data. Just another test result, pointing him toward the next question worth asking. Now here's where the story escalates in a way that changes everything. Grace discovers he is not traveling to save Earth directly. He's traveling to a nearby star system, Tau Ceti, because scientists on Earth noticed something strange. Around that star, astrophage, the same organism dimming our sun, isn't behaving the same way. Something there is stopping it. His mission is to find out why and bring the answer home. And then, roughly partway through the story, something happens that completely reframes everything the reader thought they understood about this mission. He is not alone. There is another ship from another star system sent by another species also trying to solve the exact same crisis, because astrophage isn't just killing Earth's sun, it's killing theirs too. Let that sink in for a moment. Humanity's worst crisis in history is also happening at the exact same time to a completely separate civilization, light years away, that we didn't even know existed until this very moment in a story. This is where the book's second major concept begins, and it's arguably the most emotionally powerful part of the entire story. Grace discovers he's not traveling to save Earth directly. He's traveling to a nearby star system, Tau Ceti, because scientists on Earth noticed something strange. Around that star, astrophage, the same organism dimming our sun, isn't behaving the same way. Something there is stopping it. His mission is to find out why and bring the answer home. And then, roughly partway through the story, something happens that completely reframes everything the reader thought they understood about this mission. He is not alone. There is another ship from another star system sent by another species, also trying to solve the exact same crisis, because astrophage isn't just killing Earth's sun, it's killing theirs too. Let that sink in for a moment. Humanity's worst crisis in history is also happening at the exact same time to a completely separate civilization, light years away, that we didn't even know existed until this very moment in the story. This is where the book's second major concept begins, and it's arguably the most emotionally powerful part of the entire story. Grace makes contact with the alien. Weir names him Rocky, and what unfolds between these two characters, one human, one not, unable to even share a language at first, becomes a masterclass in something almost nobody talks about seriously. How trust is actually built between two parties who have every reason to misunderstand each other. A coworker who processes information completely differently than you do. A partner who expresses care in a way that doesn't match how you expect care to look. A family member from a different generation operating on assumptions you don't share. Now imagine that same challenge, except one of you breathes ammonia and the other breathes oxygen, and neither of you can physically survive in the same room without a wall of reinforced glass between you. That's the situation Grace and Rocky are in, literally, not metaphorically. There is an actual physical barrier between them for almost the entire relationship because their two forms of life cannot occupy the same atmosphere without killing one another. And what they build from that starting point, a working language from scratch, a signal system, eventually genuine friendship, is the emotional core the entire second half of this book is built on. In the next section, I'm going to walk you through exactly how that relationship develops and the surprising thing it reveals about how real trust is built. Not through comfort, but through repeated high-stakes cooperation, tested again and again under pressure neither of them chose. Stick with me, because this is where the book stops being just a survival story and becomes something much more human, even though one of its two main characters isn't human at all. Because the truth is, most meaningful cooperation in real life looks a lot more like Grace and Rocky than we like to admit. It rarely starts with instant understanding. It starts with two parties separated by some kind of barrier, real or otherwise, slowly figuring out how to work toward the same goal despite that barrier, not by pretending it isn't there. Keep that in mind as we move into the next section, because what Grace and Rocky build together is about to be tested in a way that reveals exactly what real trust costs. That test begins right now. Here's a question worth sitting with. Do you actually trust people because you understand them, or do you trust people because you've worked through something difficult together? Grace and Rocky can't rely on understanding, not at first. They come from entirely different worlds in the most literal sense possible. But they build a physical wall-mounted language, symbol by symbol, using light and sound, because neither of them can survive breathing the other's atmosphere. Every single word they learn to share with each other has to be earned through trial and error, guesswork, and correction. Notice what Weir is doing here. He's not writing a fantasy where the alien conveniently speaks perfect English within a page or two. He's showing you the actual, slow, frustrating process of building a bridge between two completely different perspectives, one small success at a time. And this is the second big idea I want you to take from this book. Trust isn't built from comfort, it's built from shared difficulty. Think about how most people approach new relationships, whether personal or professional. There's an instinct to look for common ground first, shared interests, shared background, shared sense of humor. And that instinct isn't wrong exactly, but it misses something important. Common ground makes a relationship pleasant. It doesn't necessarily make it strong. Strength comes later, usually from something neither person planned for, a problem that shows up uninvited and forces both people to decide whether they're going to show up for each other or not. Grace and Rocky have almost no common ground at all. Not culturally, not biologically, not even in how they experience time or sound or gravity. And yet, what they build ends up being one of the most genuine partnerships in the entire story, arguably stronger than most of the human relationships Grace has in his fragmented memories of Earth. Think about the people you trust most in your own life. Chances are, it's not the people who agreed with you on everything from day one. It's the people you went through something hard with. A stressful project, a crisis, a disagreement you actually worked through instead of avoided or walked away from. Grace and Rocky don't become close because they're similar. They become close because they keep showing up for each other over and over in situations where giving up would have been easy and, frankly, understandable. At one point in the story, Rocky faces a threat that could have ended everything for him. And instead of Grace treating this as not my problem, because technically Rocky isn't even from Earth and owes Grace nothing beyond the mission itself, he risks his own mission, his own survival to help. This is the moment the book quietly asks its most important question. Does cooperation only count when it's convenient? Real partnerships in relationships, in business, in friendships are not tested during the easy moments. They're tested in the moments where helping the other person costs you something real, time, safety, resources you can't get back. Grace pays that cost multiple times throughout the story, and so does Rocky in his own way, on his own terms, shaped by whatever his species considers sacrifice to mean. It's easy to romanticize this kind of loyalty from a safe distance, reading about it on a page. It's much harder to actually practice it in a real friendship or a real working relationship, when the cost isn't hypothetical anymore but sitting directly in front of you demanding an answer right now. By the time these two figure out how to work together at a technical level, sharing engineering knowledge, comparing notes on how their two civilizations tried to solve the exact same astrophage problem, something remarkable happens. Between one species that thinks in terms of human intuition and another that thinks in a completely different, structural, almost mathematical way, they discover something that neither of them could have found alone. Think about what that actually implies. Two completely different ways of thinking, forced together by circumstance, produce a solution neither perspective could reach in isolation. That's not just a plot device. That's a genuinely useful model for how the best ideas often get built in the real world, whether it's a business partnership, a creative collaboration, or a marriage. It's worth noticing how often real breakthroughs in any field come from exactly this kind of unlikely pairing. Not two people who think alike, congratulating each other on agreeing. Two people who think differently, forced to reconcile their approaches until something better than either original idea emerges. And this leads us straight into the third and final concept from this book, arguably the most important one in the entire story. Grace and Rocky discover a second organism, one that seems to actually feed on astrophage itself, a predator, in a sense, to the very thing threatening both of their worlds. This discovery is the mission's entire purpose, finally within reach. But getting it home, actually delivering this discovery back to Earth, back to Rocky's homeworld, back to the billions of lives depending on it, comes at an enormous personal cost, one the story doesn't shy away from showing in full. Because here's the brutal truth this book doesn't soften. Knowing the solution and being able to deliver it are two completely different problems. Discovery is not the same as delivery. One is intellectual, the other is sacrifice. The ship is damaged, fuel is limited, and Grace is faced with an impossible choice about what he's willing to give up, physically and personally, to make sure this discovery actually reaches the people who need it, even if he never finds out whether it worked. This is where the book's final and most powerful idea lives, the idea of sacrifice without guarantee of reward. Pause on that phrase for a second, because it's easy to let it slide past as a nice-sounding line without actually feeling the weight of it. Sacrifice without guarantee of reward means doing the hard thing without knowing if it will work, without knowing if anyone will ever find out, without knowing if it even mattered in the end. That's a very different kind of courage than the kind we usually celebrate. We tend to admire people after we know their sacrifice paid off. Hindsight makes courage look obvious. But Grace has to make his choice before any of that certainty exists, standing entirely inside the unknown. Most stories dangle a reward in front of the hero to justify the sacrifice. A homecoming, recognition, applause. This book refuses that shortcut and forces its main character, and by extension its reader, to sit with a much harder question. In the next section, I'm going to show you exactly what Grace chooses, why it matters, and what it reveals about a kind of decision-making almost nobody wants to talk about honestly. Making the right choice even when you will never personally see the benefit of it, and never get to hear anyone say thank you. Stay with me, because the ending of this book is not what you'd expect from a typical space adventure, and the lesson inside it might be the most valuable thing in this entire summary. Because up until this point, everything Grace has done has had some visible, measurable payoff. He fixes a system, and the ship responds. He solves a puzzle, and he survives another day. Every action so far has had feedback attached to it, something to confirm he's on the right track. What he's about to face has none of that feedback built in. No confirmation, no feedback loop, just a decision made once with consequences he may never personally witness. That absence of feedback is exactly what makes the next choice so different from everything that came before it, and exactly why it deserves its own section rather than a rushed final paragraph. Keep that in mind as we move forward, because the stakes of this final test are about to become very real, and what Grace decides will reframe everything you've heard so far. Here's a question that most self-help content is too afraid to ask directly. Would you still do the right thing if you knew you'd never get credit for it, never see the outcome, and never come home? That is exactly the choice Ryland Grace faces near the end of this book. The discovery has been made. The astrophage predator organism is real, and it can save Earth, and it can save Rocky's homeworld too. But getting that discovery delivered means someone has to make an enormous sacrifice involving fuel, timing, and survival odds that are not in Grace's favor. Without walking through every plot detail, here's the essence of it. Grace ultimately chooses a path that prioritizes getting the solution home, even at devastating personal cost to himself. Now pause and think about how rare that actually is, in fiction and in real life. Most stories are built around a hero who sacrifices, struggles, and then gets rewarded with recognition, a homecoming, applause waiting at the finish line. This book resists that formula. Weir forces you to sit with a much harder, much more honest question. What does sacrifice look like when there's no guarantee of a parade waiting at the end? This is the third concept I want you to carry with you. Real impact often requires acting without the certainty of applause. Think about the best teachers you've ever had, the mentors who guided you at a point in your life you barely appreciated at the time, the people who built the infrastructure, the systems, the quiet groundwork that your entire life depends on, that you will never personally thank because you don't even know their names. Most of the good in this world was built by people who never got to see how far their impact would travel. Ryland's decision at the climax of this book is the fictional embodiment of that same principle. He is not chasing glory. He's solving a problem because the problem needs solving, and he happens to be the one capable of solving it, whether or not anyone ever finds out what he did. There's a specific kind of quiet dignity in that, one that's easy to miss if you're only watching for dramatic payoff. Most of the meaningful decisions in real life don't come with a soundtrack or an audience. They happen in ordinary moments, unnoticed, and the person making them usually never finds out exactly how much it mattered. Grace never fully knows in the moment he makes his choice exactly how things will turn out for the people he's trying to save. He has to act on the belief that it matters, not on the certainty that it will work. That's a much harder position to act from than most stories are willing to admit, and it's precisely why this ending sticks with readers long after they close the book. Now here's the transformation moment. Here's what it means for you, right now, today, listening to this. Most people wait for certainty before they act. They wait until the outcome is guaranteed, until the recognition is promised, until the right time magically appears on its own. Grace never gets that luxury. He acts anyway, because waiting isn't an option when the stakes are this high, and the clock is running whether he feels ready or not. Imagine applying just 1% of that mindset to your own life. The project you've been avoiding because you're not sure it'll be appreciated. The hard conversation you've been putting off because there's no guaranteed good outcome waiting on the other side of it. The skill you want to build even though nobody's clapping for you while you learn it, in private, alone, with no audience at all. What if you moved forward anyway? Not because the ending is guaranteed, but because the problem in front of you actually matters, and you are, in this moment, the person capable of solving it, whether or not it ever gets noticed. This is where most advice content stops short. It tells you to take action without ever addressing the real reason you're stalling in the first place. The fear that you'll do the work and nobody will notice, that you'll take the risk and it won't pay off, that you'll show up fully and still walk away empty-handed. Project Hail Mary doesn't pretend that fear is irrational. It's completely rational. Grace has every reason to be afraid of exactly that outcome. The book simply shows you what it looks like to act anyway, fear and all, because the alternative, doing nothing, guarantees the worst outcome for certain. That's the emotional core hiding underneath all the science fiction, the alien contact, the sun-dimming crisis. Project Hail Mary is ultimately a story about showing up for a problem bigger than yourself, without needing a guaranteed reward waiting on the other side of that effort. Ryland Grace didn't start this story as a hero. He started as a forgotten scientist with one dismissed idea and no memory of who he even was. And by the end, he becomes the reason 2 entire civilizations survive a threat neither of them saw coming until it was almost too late. Not because he was fearless, because he kept testing, kept adjusting, kept trusting the process even when it embarrassed him, and kept showing up for someone completely different from himself, even when it cost him everything he had left to give. Every single concept in this video connects back to that same through line. Break the impossible problem into testable pieces. Build trust with people who see the world completely differently than you do. And act on what matters, even when there's no guarantee anyone will ever know you did. 3 ideas, 1 story. And every one of them still applies, whether your version of astrophage is a stalled career, a strained relationship, or a goal you've quietly given up on believing you'll ever reach. So here's my question for you. And I actually want you to answer this in the comments because I think it splits people right down the middle every time this topic comes up. If you were in Ryland Grace's position, if the right choice meant saving billions of lives you'd never meet, but meant you personally would never go home again, would you make the same choice he did? Comment your honest answer below. Not the answer that sounds noble, the real one. The one you'd actually make at 3 in the morning, alone, with nobody watching and no one to impress. I genuinely want to see where people land on this, because in my experience, this question divides viewers almost perfectly in half, and both sides usually have a completely reasonable argument for why they're right. And if this story pulled you in the way it pulled me in when I first read it, the book goes so much deeper than what I could cover here. There's technical detail, humor, and emotional weight in the full novel that a 30-minute video simply can't replicate. I've linked it in the description. Grabbing a copy through that link directly supports this channel, and it's genuinely one of the best science fiction reads of the last several years, whether or not you consider yourself a science fiction person at all. If this video gave you something worth thinking about today, subscribe, because I break down stories like this one every week. Stories that aren't just entertainment, but frameworks for how to think, how to solve problems, and how to show up for something bigger than yourself, even when nobody's watching. Because somewhere out there, right now, there's a problem only you can solve. Not a spaceship, not a dying star. Something much smaller, much closer, sitting quietly in your own life, waiting for you to stop avoiding it. You already know exactly what it is. You've known for a while. No memory, no plan, no guarantee it would work. He started anyway. That's the whole story, really. And that's the whole point.